Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This speaker show, we're talking about TV shows that are crime dramas. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the Season 4 premiere of Only Murders in the Building. A great season premiere. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, I'd actually wanted to talk about something. I'd actually completely forgot about the Saz situation because I was talking about this probably like a couple weeks ago when I was referencing this season. I talked about like, oh, they didn't really set up the whole murder for the next season like they always do. And I'm like, oh, I completely forgot Saz was like the victim in this situation. I was like, that's sad. Now the big question then becomes, well, it's a question then, and the question still remains now. Who was the target? It seems like it was Charles, but maybe it was always Saz because Saz wanted to tell Charles something. Or once again, Saz has always been mistaken for Charles because, I mean, Saz has done everything to be Charles and everything. And in that capacity, his stand-in is double and all that, right? But either way, I was so curious to see how this all plays out. I was like, the way they're recording the podcast, it seems like it's the same night of Saz's death. So I was like, okay, so I guess Charles hasn't gone back to his apartment yet. And so when he does, I was like, okay. And when he said something, I was like, you're not going to see the body immediately. You're going, okay, you see the bottle of wine. And then Mabel says something, but she went after the cork that flew away and she started wiping something up. And she was like, oh, like the wine got everywhere. I was like, it's not the wine, it's Saz's blood, isn't it? Like, I wonder if she's cleaning up Saz's dying message. Well, we see Saz's body's going, so I was like, they got rid of Saz's body. It was like, whoever it was might have already cleaned it up. Like, whatever Mabel wiped up might have been what was left of the dying message, and she just assumed it was part of the wine. She did notice something on the, with the stove, and I guess it's later on what she was looking at was like I thought like one of the nozzles was turned or something. Like I thought that's what she was noticing, but it was like no, like she noticed like what she thought, probably didn't think much of it. She's like, oh, something dried up here. She probably just thought, oh, it wasn't clean, didn't think about being blood. So it's sad because you're like the entire time Charles is like, yo, Saz, where you at? And Saz doesn't hit him back, so he's like, oh, like we never ran into Saz last night, like what's going on? Saz was supposed to get the bottle, come back to us. So, but before Charles can even really have any opportunity to really like fill all that out, a lot of stuff is happening. Oliver finds out that the play, which he went through so much at the end of season 2 and throughout all season 3 to make happen, apparently it's no longer happening because the funds were pulled from it. Because it's like, well, your producers are going to jail for murder, so they needed to pay for bail. And I love, he's like, yeah, they had to pay for bail or their defense or whatever, some shit like that. It's like, I love that. That's what understandable. They only got one good review, and that was from Maxine. The rest were middling. So now, like, I love that. It's kind of like, and we're moving on. Don't even worry about it. Like, that's down the toilet now. And Oliver's just drowning in sorrow. He's like, Mama, is that you? It's just like, losing his damn mind. But then it turns out the team is getting, emailed by someone, what was it? Bev Mellon. And it's a situation of she wants to meet with them because here's the meta of it all. Now, because of the success of the podcast of Only Murders in the Building, it is a situation now that they want to make a movie out of it. So, because that's, like I said, because of the Saz of, because I didn't remember the Saz of it all, I thought the murder was going to happen in LA, but it turns out no, it's still here in New York, but I'm sure they're going to bounce back and forth between, because it seems like whatever it is Saz discovered probably was discovered in LA because that's where a lot of her notes and whatever she left behind was. So, but either way, the squad ends up going to LA, which before that, I love Howard's got a dog. He's like, I wanted to get a cat, but I got a dog, Gravy. I did think it was interesting because if you look at the subtitles, it's spelled differently. I'm like, why has he got an E in his Gravy, but like the other one doesn't? It's like, well, we find out later on it's a pun. But I was like, I thought that was weird. I was like, oh, that's interesting. But I love that he's like trying to capitalize on Mabel, and it's like, we should do a podcast, and eventually they'll call it the Animal Jobs, where it's like we talk about animals and the jobs that they had previously, which I'm sure that's a niche enough thing that you could probably get like, that you could draw a lot of attention with that. But I love Mabel's kind of like, yeah, I kind of have no interest in that, really. He's like, oh, you'll think about it, right? She's like, I promise you I won't. But it's like, yeah, Mabel kind of doesn't have any, she doesn't know what her future prospects are. She doesn't have a real job in her mind. So it's like, all she has is podcast. That's the closest thing she has to a quote-unquote real job, but it's like, doesn't know what the prospects of what her life is going to be, what she wants for herself. I mean, Mabel's been stumbling for a while. I think especially like the past few seasons, she's been trying to find her footing, and I think this season might be potentially that, you know. I think this season I think is going to revolve around all of them being lost in that regard, where it's like Oliver's trying to find his footing, and so is Charles. I mean, I think Charles has always tried to find his footing, but a lot of stuff kind of fell apart last season, the joy of it all and stuff. So either way, I love when they're in LA. What's the first thing production they come across? It's a freaking Godzilla movie, and it's like, oh, he's been getting a lot of work lately. It's like, oh, that's funny considering like we had a year of like 2 Godzilla movies coming out back to back, you know, -1 and Godzilla Kong. So I think that is so interesting. And it's like, well, before that there was like all those Godzilla movies before then and too, stuff like that. So there's like this show's always been very meta, and like I'm sure there's going to be a lot of meta to this season as well, but especially this episode when they meet the person Bev, who's played by Molly Shannon. I didn't know she was going to be playing that character, but I knew some of the people that were going to be appearing in this season because I saw some of the star casting lists. But anyway, I love that. It's so interesting how she talks about it, because they're like, oh, they find out this project of making this a movie is a lot further than they thought. She's like, oh yeah, like if I see a hot IP, I go after it hard, and I always go first. So especially with other studios running around, I'm like, oh, that's so, you know, it's like, especially that sizzling word every studio loves, IP. It's like, get to every studio exec, like, for lack of a better term, like, hard or wet, you know? So, and it's like, oh yeah, like, you know, we're going to jump on this opportunity. Algorithm says that we need to basically release it around Christmas, which are like, ooh, hearing all this, this is giving Barry, because Barry's very like meta in that regard, the TV show Barry, if you've ever seen it, Bill Hader, it's very much revolved around like LA and like acting and the movies, like Hollywood and stuff like that. It's very meta on a lot of that stuff. So it's giving Barry in that regard of like, oh yeah, the algorithm, and it's like telling us to release the movie around this particular time. You know, it's box office gold. You know, and so it's just so interesting. And as they kind of basically break each one of them down, Oliver didn't seem like he had as much issue with his description as much as Charles did with the whole unfun uncle thing, and Mabel with the mumbling and stuff like that. And then we find out later on we find out who is playing each of them respectively. I was like, that's so dope. Oliver's being played by Zach Galifianakis. Eugene Levy is playing Charles, and Eva Longoria is being played by Mabel, which I was like, okay, that's an interesting choice. And I even love when they explain it later on. It's like, oh, why did they age up the character? It's like, well, because, you know, the whole dynamics has kind of been labeled as creepy, which I'm like, you know, you being your age compared to the rest of the two of them, I'm like, that's so interesting. I was like, is that actually an inside joke, a meta inside joke? Because has that been lobbied against this show or something because of the age difference between Selena, Martin, and Steve? Like, I wonder, has that been used against him? I wonder, is that where that comes from? That'd be funny if that has been a critique against this show because of that age gap and them thinking like it's so like weird or creepy. I was like, oh, it's funny. I also love Oliver's introduction to Zach Galifianakis, and he's like, oh my god, he's like, oh, I'm Jack Black. He's like, oh, Jack Black. He's like, no, I'm Zach. I was like, oh, Zach, and like butchers Zach's last name. Which I'm wondering, is that supposed to be a meta joke? Does Zach Galifianakis constantly get mistaken for Jack Black? It's like, oh yeah, you're that big funny guy, Jack Black. It's like, no, I'm Zach Galifianakis. And I love that he thought he was being trolled. He's like, oh, I get what you're doing. You're doing the whole you're trying to between two ferns me. And Oliver's like, between what? It's like, no, Oliver legitimately has no idea who you are. I was like, that's so. He's like, hey, I was in the second highest grossing comedy of all time. Oh my God, what was it? He's like, oh my God, you're that little kid from Home Alone. I'm like, you're mistaking him for Macaulay Culkin now? And he's like, oh my God, what have they done to you? And he's like, I'm done. And she's like, Bev is like, what can I do for you? He was like, you'll basically, she's like, I'll greenlight your dream project. He was like, Aaron Brockovich, but it's me. And she's like, no. Legally Blonde, but it's me. No. Spider-Man, but it's me. And she's like, fine, we'll do the Aaron Brockovich one. He's like, okay, sure. Now, which I'm like, first and foremost, this is Paramount. They can't do anything for you with Spider-Man. Hey, I know my studio stuff. That's Sony. Sony could hook you up with that, making you, which I'm like, has he ever been in anything superhero related? I don't think he has. Zach Galifianakis, I don't think he is. I'm also like thinking too much about it because I'm like, well, I know he was in the movie Due Date with Robert Downey Jr., Iron Man himself, now Doctor Doom. But I'm trying to think. He's probably been in other movies with people who've been in Marvel. I mean, the question becomes, well, who hasn't been in Marvel now? Tangents and all that. That's I'm going on a massive tangent. Sorry, but I love that whole bit. And he's like, oh yeah, because I'm sorry, I'm not a desperate housewife or Mr. Shits over here. It's like, right, Desperate Housewives and Schitt's Creek. I was like, right. But like I was talking about before about Mabel feeling lost, that's kind of why she's not too keen on the whole signing over her rights thing. It's like, well, that kind of becomes a complicated thing where you're like, especially when they use the language of, oh yeah, selling your likeness and your likeness and your the rights to your life and stuff like that. I'm like, that you do want to get a lawyer, which I love. Like Charles being like, oh, we want this much. She's like, it's just the number 4. He's like 4,000, 100 million, 1,000. He's like, or 5, and then Oliver throws in 5. It's like, because they're trying. It's like, dude, we will give you whatever you want to. Just get your lawyers to draw up contracts, and we'll kind of pay whatever you want. We want to make this happen. We want to jump on this immediately. So that's fascinating. But like, getting back to Mabel, she just feels like, right, those descriptors they used of me, like jobless and mumbling. Like, is that like she's feeling like if they make this movie, it almost submits to her, that's who she is. It's just kind of like, oh, that's all I'll ever kind of be in a lot of people's eyes in a way, which almost feels, once again, maybe I'm reading too much into it, does feel a little kind of like, oh, that's interesting how there is an element of that with, you know, an actor in general, where it's just kind of like, right, when you're done a particular role, you'll always be that role for some people. Like, yes, people will be able to easily see you in other roles, but they'll always associate you with a certain role. Like, I mean, using Selena Gomez, for example, I will always associate her with Alex from Wizards of Waverly Place, you know? Because I want to say, and I could be mistaken, I want to say that's the first thing I ever saw her in. I also do love the whole like home footage thing they had at the beginning, which I thought was kind of cute, which I'm like, oh, I've never seen Steve Martin that young or Martin Short that young. Because I'm thinking like in my head, like I think like Steve Martin's always been white haired in my, like, to my recollection. Maybe I've seen, I feel like I've never seen him younger with like his hair, like its original color. So I was like, oh, you know, so, but I don't think I've ever seen Martin Short that young either. So it was like, oh, it's kind of like throwing me for a loop. And also seeing like, oh, it's like, it's kind of cute seeing Selena Gomez. Like, so, like I said, I think it's so dope they were able to include like home footage like that, which is so adorable on all fronts. I actually looked it up because I was actually curious. I was like, me and Selena Gomez have to be the same age, aren't we? And it's like, yeah, we are. I'm like a month older than her. I was like, oh yeah. Either way, tangents and all that aside. Like I said, it all just ties back to Mabel feeling like she doesn't really know who she is and what she wants to do and what she wants to be. And just, it feels like if she lets the movie happening just feels like it submits in her, like, have I really made enough progress? Like, what steps have I really taken in my life? She just feels stuck right now as who she is and where she is. And she doesn't feel like, I think she doesn't feel like she feels like she's still wondering. And I think wandering through life is a fine thing until you're able to, you know, find that footing, until you're able to firmly stand and be like, yeah, I'm done wondering. I think I figured myself out. You know, she's still at the age, but she feels like everyone else around her, you know, because obviously, you know, you can make the argument that Charles and Oliver, this isn't just their second wind, this is their third wind in a lot of ways. And it's like for Mabel, it's like, have I even had my second wind yet? Like, when's that next stage in my life? Like, you know, that renaissance in a lot of ways, that fresh, like, pacing of like, this is where my life is, this is cemented where I'm going, you know? So maybe Mabel's overthinking it, thinking like, oh, if the movie's this way, it's just going to cement who I am. But it's like, especially, she just feels that because she hasn't taken any strides forward. I think in a lot of ways she feels that way. So it was interesting too, like hearing her and Ava talk about, you know, because Ava's like, oh yeah, like basically I, you know, wanted to do more. I wanted to not only act, I wanted to write, I wanted to direct. You know, what was it she was saying? Sell this, sell that. You know, gin and all the different things. So she's like computers, and she's like, and I went off and I did that. I'm like, I'm sure every single thing she mentioned probably is real things that she's been associated with in her career. You know, whether it's commercials or whether she just legitimately is like a spokesman for some businesses or something like that, or the face of a business. Like, because I'm trying to think, like, especially the computer thing. I'm like, have I ever seen Eva Longoria like associated with computers? I'm not well versed in her entire career, so I'm not being like, oh, I know everything there is to know about her. But I was like, oh, has she been like the spokesperson or just like the face of like a computer company or something for a while, or was it, or has she done like computer commercials or something? I wonder where that was coming from. Like, it feels like that was all specifically related to her being like, no, like those are just aspects of her career, because I know she has like directed. Cause wasn't that movie? I think it came out last year. In fact, it came out on Hulu, didn't it? I think it had a little bit of a theatrical run, but it was like Flaming Hot. It was about the Flaming Hot Cheetos, maybe. I actually don't remember what, but I believe she directed the movie. That was the whole point I was making. Either way, but she was telling Mabel, like, basically get whatever money you can from the studio and then bill that to do whatever you want, except for whiskey, because that's my thing, you know? I mean, which I think that's also a meta thing, too, of like, yeah, if you notice, like, a lot of actors have gotten into the alcohol business. It must be extremely lucrative. I mean, makes sense. Alcohol in general seems like a very lucrative business, but like so many actors have gotten into like the alcohol business, you know, whether it's gin or whatever the case may be. There's just so many actors who've gotten associated with it. So I feel like there's probably something meta there too. She probably legitimately, I wonder in real life, is she like associated with some kind of alcohol like in real life too? So I wonder, is that like a double layered meta-ness to that? You also have Oliver running into, well, not running into, because he invited Loretta. He's like, oh my God, it feels like forever. It's like, no, it's literally been 5 days since the last time you saw Loretta. It's only been that long since the season 3 finale. But either way, he's happy for her career being where it is, but he even says that line of just, because she's like, oh, like, would you want to move out to LA with me, considering like, well, the podcast is on hold for now because you don't have any new case. You also have the whole, well, the death rattle is now dead, so why don't you come out? And he's like, I just want to, and I was like, is he about that? It sounded like, and she kind of was perking up like, oh, like, is he going to ask her to marry him? It seemed like it, but he was just like, just give me time to think about it, you know? He's just like, your career is taking off, and I just hope I'm able to keep up. It's just, I think it's, Oliver's like so in love with her, and he just because I was actually kind of like concerned we wouldn't continue this, even though like she's going to LA. I knew this season was going to LA. I just was worried like, oh, we're going to end that. But I saw Meryl Streep's name in the opening credits. I was like, oh, cool, good. I'm glad we're continuing that, because as we talked about countless times, Mabel's love life is kind of basically gets nipped in the bud every season. Like whatever love interest she gets never lasts beyond the season. So that's why I was kind of concern on Oliver's point. I mean, especially because things didn't work out between Joy and Charles too. So I was like, oh, that's such a bummer. I'm curious, is she going to be in this season or not? Because I didn't realize it, because I feel so stupid. I wish I had. I think I would have known at the time. But the actress who plays Joy, Andrea Martin, I believe that's her last name. I didn't realize that's Sister Andrea in the TV show Evil. So that's why I was like wondering, like, would she have even been able to be in this season? Because I don't know like what this show's production was like in comparison to Evil, because she might have been filming Evil at the time, so she might not have been able to film anything for this. I mean, that doesn't say she can't pop up later in the season or anything like that, but it just kind of got me thinking. Well, I said Andrea, but her, just like her character, her name may just be Andrea. Either way, that's what I was, because she gets referenced in episode 2, so that just kind of made me kind of think about it. But my point was like, right, Charles' love life didn't work out either, so it seemed like Oliver's the only one who walked away with that. And I'm curious. I'm sure there's going to be complications for him and Loretta this season, but we'll see. But obviously, a big part of this episode too is Charles being so concerned about Saz. They stopped by Saz's place, which used to be Charles's place, at one point in time before Saz ended up getting it. But you see, like, there's packages out front. There's a whole bunch of mail, and when Charles looked in, the flowers were dying. So it's like Saz hasn't been here for a while. But he's just kind of like, well, I guess Saz is okay. Maybe just Saz is so busy, playing double for Scott Bakula on that thing they're working on, that I just, and he was just concerned. And it's like, right, this is a good friend of his. That I wonder, like, it does seem like Charles doesn't always have a lot of friends, and at least someone that understands him as well as like Saz does. I think he has that with Mabel and Oliver now, but I think for a good chunk of time, that I think the argument could be made Saz might be Charles' only friend, his oldest and only friend. So maybe that's what makes this whole situation even sadder. So Charles is worried about Saz because Oliver's so worried about his career, and considering like, hey, well, my career has kind of had its ups and downs, and now it's on the downswing again, and I need this deal to go through because that put my name in a lot of people's mouths again. And I think he thinks would probably help with his relationship with Loretta. It's like, right, she's on the up and up, and if I'm on the downswing, she'll kind of realize she's too good for me and leave me. That insecurity, I'm sure, is kind of there, and Oliver kind of wants to take advantage of this opportunity, and Mabel is kind of the one that's hung up on things, so he's pressuring her to take the job, take this opportunity, and she ultimately does. We don't know what she asked Bev to give her. We know she wrote something down, but even the guy that's kind of writing the script is like, oh, fuck. Like, whatever it was such a big deal, and I'm curious what it was. I was like, not unless she ends up. I was about to say, would it be an interesting like producer credit or something like that? Which Selena, is she a producer on this show? I know she a producer on a lot of stuff, but I would assume at this point she'd be a producer on the show if she wasn't already one. But whatever the case may be, I don't know. So I wonder, but it feels like it'd be something bigger than that. So I'm so curious. It'll probably be a while before we find out what she actually got offered. So I was so curious how long it was going to be before they found out about Saz. Interestingly enough, it took Charles running into Scott Bakula. When he saw someone and thought it was Saz, I was like, didn't even cross my mind that it would be Scott Bakula. So when it was him, I was like, oh shit, well, it makes sense that you'd be able to kind of do that. And I love that he's like, hey, I'm glad to see, another white-haired white dude be able to kind of basically make his way through or something. He said something like that, which I was like, okay, that's funny. But yeah, he's the one that informs. I'm like, yeah, like I never run into Saz. She was supposed to be standing like my double for like this pilot I was doing. And in that moment, Charles got worried and concerned. So they went back to Saz's place and saw all this stuff. And it's just like Saz was investigating some stuff. And then I love the twofold of Charles hears from Lester about the window being replaced. He's like, what? I haven't. And it's like, right, he didn't do that. The killer put in for that request to happen. But I guess it's like interesting that. And so it took that long for Lester to get around to it. Luckily, it hadn't happened yet. Because Charles kept hearing the whistling sound thinking he was going crazy. He's like, oh, I might have a brain tumor or something. Which I thought, I love Oliver being like, oh, basically don't tease me. Don't try to make me happy or something like that when he was spiraling a bit at the time. But at the same time, Mabel finds out what Howard kept calling, like I brought up earlier, the dog Gravy has an E in his their name, because I can't remember if it's a boy or girl. I think it's girl, but I could be mistaken. It's like why Gravy has an E in their name is because it's a pun, because they were a cadaver dog, and you're just like, oh, that's what the barking was about. It was about, at first I was like, he was barking up, so I was like, is that supposed to imply like Saz's body was up there? It probably was. The killer probably didn't have enough time to move Saz's body that night probably had enough time to move it to like, well, because it was barking up. So I don't know if it was just smelling something and it just was barking in the air, but I was like wondering like, because or was it a different room? Isn't there like wasn't there a crawl space situation in a previous episode in previous season where like Charles, like pseudo daughter of sorts, basically, I don't remember what room that was associated with. I don't remember if that was associated with Charles' room or was that someone else's room. I can't remember. Was it Teddy's room that it was associated with? I legitimately don't remember. Correct me in the comments down below. But I remember like there was kind of like this crawl space area between the walls that they were in for a bit. But I'm like, because I was about to say, I don't consider it's an apartment bit. And I was like, I don't think you have an attic of sorts that they could have been responding to. So like I said, the dog was just probably in general. But I was wondering if like Saz's body was somewhere in an apartment and just hadn't gotten disposed of at that point in time. But it's like, no, it definitely would have already gotten disposed of. So all this news happening at once, they go back to New York and they find the bullet hole in the glass. Then Howard brings over Gravy and leads them to the incinerator. You're like, oh my God. And to me, I don't, like, that was extra depressing. It's not only did Saz get killed, they burned Saz's body to cover up any evidence and to get rid of the body. I was like, it's interesting too because because just when the power went out earlier on, now it all ties back together because when they were recording the episode for the podcast, they were like, oh, we haven't had a power surge in such a long time. It's like, oh yeah, but the moment they stopped using the incinerator, and now I'm like, because that showcases like, yeah, definitely they incinerated Saz's body that night. They didn't like stash it somewhere and then it's like that the moment the blackout happened, it's because of that. So it gives you a timetable of when Saz died, even without they have probably have recorded evidence of when that happened to an extent. So, but them going to the incinerator, and you see the piles of ash, I was like, how are you going to, I was like, there's no way Saz's like hat's going to survive or something like that. But then I forgot, I was like, right, they set up in the previous scene the whole point of Saz had so many like replacements for like metal like joints and stuff replaced, from Bulgaria and stuff like that. And Charles finds him and holds him in his hand. And it's like the look on his face, it is so heartbreaking. Like I said, I think legitimately that you can make the argument that Saz might be Charles' only other friend and who predates obviously Mabel and Oliver. And it's like to know that person who's gone, the person who knew you better than anyone else, who was kind of like your shadow, was your everything. It's like, that's really, really heartbreaking, especially because, with everything. That was just heartbreaking. That just last shot of the episode, him holding those pieces of Saz's metal bones and stuff like that. I'm not thinking of the right word. Those like metal implants and stuff like that. I guess that's the best wording I can think of. I can't think of the right word off the top of my head, but that was extra depressing. So the team is back in New York for now. So like I said, I do believe that I was under the impression or at least thinking that this entire season was going to take place in LA, but it's like, no, it's going to bounce back and forth most likely because obviously the movies in the works and stuff like that, while they're also dealing with this. I wonder, we don't know what story they're going to do for the movie. Are they going to come up with a new one, or are they going to adapt, season 1's murder, season 2's murder, season 3's murder, or will they try and incorporate this season's murder into the movie, continuing the meta-ness to it, which is going to be like effed up and disgusting at the same time. But I'm sure like the studio head's gonna be like, well, it's kind of like super fresh, and so kind of having the movie simultaneously happen as the podcast does, it, it'll be like this incestuous feeding into its own self type of thing. I don't know. I'm curious to see how they handle that. I'm really curious to ultimately see where this season ends up taking us. I avoided looking at the trailers. Aside from getting like a thumbnail for a video, I've avoided the trailer. I try to avoid trailers as much as possible, specifically with new seasons of stuff. But so I don't know where this season is going to take us. Like I said, I saw some of the guest stars we're getting this season, but I haven't seen all of them, so I'm curious what guest stars we're going to get and what capacities and where everyone's story ends up taking them this season. We'll definitely learn more about Saz as we kind of flash back to see what Saz was up to, and Charles probably looking back on him and Saz's relationship, so we'll get an opportunity to learn a little bit more in that capacity. What was Charles' significant other from the first season who ended up being a killer? Because her and Saz started dating in season 2, didn't they? Or was it... I think they started dating season 2, and I think they were dating in season 3. I don't think they broke up, did they? So not unless she comes back in that capacity. I don't know. I don't know if that... what that's going to be, if that's going to be anything at all. I might be just like... overthinking that. They might not play into that at all. Be interesting if they did, but we'll see. Like I said, I don't remember where that relationship was. I want to say they were still dating, but they might have broken up and I just don't remember. Like I said, either way, I'm excited to see where the next episode takes us going forward with all of this. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.